Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining, and apologies that for the cancellation last week. I understood that not everyone received the email announcing that there would not be a share last week. So I'm sorry if for those of you that I troubled and caused to come to the Zoom meeting, even though there in the end wasn't a share. 2 weeks ago, if you remember what we were discussing, we were learning about the different qualities of seichel, the different areas of our minds and how they operate. And Wolbe had really argued in an extended piece in his third chapter in the section of the second volume of Wolbe in Alei Shur that deals with what is a human. Wolbe had argued that the seichel, the mind, and our ability to reason and think is a very central route to true spirituality. It's a very central route to being able to access and relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He had argued that in many ways this is the primary the primary means we humans are given to connect to Hashem. This was his discussion in previous weeks. In the last session, we began touching upon a particular way of breaking down these qualities of seichel, these qualities of mind, into the very famous distinction between chokhmah, bina, and das. And this week we're going to carry on looking at these three areas of human intelligence and human reason. And Wolbe is going to argue that das is the one which is important to transfer or move an abstract intellectual concept into one which can affect our midos and our personality traits. I stress that it's really only in this last piece of Wolbe that he begins speaking about midos. Till now, despite being a Baal Musa, one might think Baal Musa, what do Baalei Musa speak about? They speak about midos. They speak about qualities of character. They're not interested in the mind and seichel. That's for the Rosh Hashiva, that's for the Rav, that's for the Lamdan, that's for the philosopher. That's not for the Baal Musa, the one who's interested in character development. Wolbe has argued that it's only when we have a clarity of thought that we can know what we are, what we're meant to be, where we're going, where we're heading, what our purpose is in life, what our direction is, where we're meant to find meaning. It's only through our minds that we can connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That certainly has to come first. That's the first stage. And that's why there was this extended essay of Wolbe when he was speaking about what is a human being, in which he emphasized the importance of reason and intelligence in this spiritual search that all of us undergo. Nonetheless, now that he's finished speaking about that, he does want to speak about how we can translate this into midas, how we can translate this into molding our character. But again, simply because we've had a couple of weeks gap, I emphasize how much he spoke about the idea that the mind and reason has to come first. We can't work on our midas till we know what we want to be and we have an understanding of the world and ourselves and an insight. Only then can the midas work follow. Now, having said that, Wolbe now is interested in breaking down our minds into, as we said, chokhmah, bina, and das. Chokhmah generally translated as wisdom, but perhaps more accurately means knowledge, things that we have, that which we know, things that we've, information that we've received. Rashi says chokhmah is that which we receive from that which is outside ourselves, from others. That is chokhmah. Bina is insight or understanding, as we discussed this in the last few weeks, is that which we can use to build and draw out principles because we've comprehended it. We don't just have the information that we have, but we managed to comprehend it and therefore draw out that which is deeper from within it. And this is the quality of Bina, is insight and extracting the fundamental principles behind it. This can be a scientist who sees how the world operates, but is able therefore to draw out the rules behind it and therefore extend it further. It can be a Talmud Chacham who uses it to draw out the principles of Torah and therefore apply Pesach, halachic ruling, to new scenarios. And it can be someone engaged in regular life, in work, in doing anything, in any job. One can be a baker, a plumber, a cook, a designer, a beautician. It doesn't matter what the work is. One can simply do that which one has been taught, and one has maybe been taught vast amounts of information about all sorts of different scenarios, and therefore very successfully operate like that. That is someone who has chokhmah, they have knowledge and information, but they haven't achieved bina, they haven't understood the underlying principles, and that's bina. And then das is also translated as knowledge, refers to that which we internalize, that which I know, that which has become part of me. And Wolbe referenced two psukim, or two sets of psukim, both from Mishli, which use two parallels or two metaphors to explain what is chokhmah and what is bina and what is das. And here, therefore, I refer you to page Lamed Base in the handout, in the source sheet. For those of you who don't have the source sheet, I'll post it on the chat group on the. I'll just post it to everyone in case you want to quickly download the source sheet. I've posted it on the chat. The second last page on the source sheet, Wolbe references two sets of psukim in Mishli. So this is the letter Gimel, and he says as follows: Hamokum, and we did look at these psukim. We're just going to repeat them quickly and then move on. Hamokum shebo nevcha hakara sichlis lemidos, the place within ourselves, within our being, in which hakara sichlis, intellectual understanding, is converted. Vanhoga b'poel, an action is converted into lemidos vanhoga b'poel, is converted into character traits and actual practice. He hadas is the mind, the reason. So the point of transition, the interface between abstract mind and midot, character traits, character forming, molding ourselves, and actions is the das. That stage of the mind is das. Mahi das, and therefore what is das? Answers Wolbe here on page Lamed Base in the source sheet. And he brings two psukim which use metaphors about what das is. The first one he references is in Mishli 24, and it says as follows: B'chokhmah yiboneh bayis. Through wisdom is a house built, or b'tzvuna yiskoning, but through understanding it's established firmly. But b'das chadorim yimolu. It's in das that the rooms are filled. So in this moshel, a house is built with das. Its foundations are in bina. It's established firmly with bina, and the rooms are furnished with chokhmah. This is the first metaphor. Sorry, with das. The rooms are furnished with a third of them with das. The second metaphor he uses, or Mishli Shlomo HaMelech uses, is in the third chapter of Mishli. Hashem b'chokhmah yosad oretz. Hashem, not humans, but Hashem, who we ascribe these midas to. Again, we don't know much about Hashem, but these midas are ascribed to Hashem as if he has quality traits. We know, and we've discussed this in previous shiurim, that we can't speak about Hashem himself, but here we can speak about what he's revealed of himself and what his actions are. And the pasuk says, refers to Hashem as having these qualities of chokhmah, mina, and das, being able to use them and operate them. And therefore, the third chapter of Mishli says, Hashem b'chokhmah yosod oretz. Hashem founded the earth with chokhmah. Konein shamayim sfuna. He established the heavens with bina, with tuvana. And b'dato tohomas nivko. With das, he broke up, dug deep into the depths. So what do these metaphors mean? What are these two parallels? One talking about human beings, the second talking about Hashem, but we are meant to imitate Hashem, and therefore there's an establishment of a parallelism between these two. And here Wolbe explains as follows. He says a house refers to an external structure. We have the structure of the house. We have the roof and the floors and the walls, which protect us. We have the doors which open and close that let us in. We have the windows through which we can see, but we don't know how to use the house. We don't yet know how to connect to it. But now we need another stage. We need bina. Bina, as we already explained, is drawing out the general principles. Remember what we discussed, that with chokhmah one may have a vast amount of information, but it doesn't mean one's got to the essence, the core of what it is. For example, someone can show me 100 pieces of furniture in a large furniture store. And they can say, this is a table, and 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 this is a table. And I can memorize what they've said, so that I can point to any object identical to the 100 pieces of furniture in the furniture store, and I can label them. I can say what they are. This is a table. But if I've only memorized and remembered each one, and I haven't drawn out the principle behind it, if I meet a 101st table, I'll never be able to know what it is. So I may know this plastic object, which is red, and is this high, and has 4 legs, that's a table. And this blue object, which is somewhat higher, and has 3 legs, and is made of wood, is also a table. But I won't be able to extrapolate from that what to do with a blue object which is plastic, and has 4 legs. Because I haven't understood the general principle. A little child learning goes through these stages. They first of all are told by their parents again and again, this object, the name of this object, and this object, and this object, and they were gifted to be able to draw out of that the general principle, so that one day something goes click, and they understand what a table is, and now they can apply it to something they've never met before. This is the incredible abstract reasoning of a child. These are the qualities of Chokhmah and Bina. We go through this in our lives in childhood. A child of 2 or 3 is very conceptual already. They're drawing out the principles. And we go through this in life as a human species. When we were young as a species, we didn't understand science as well as we do now. We may have seen lots of phenomena, but we wouldn't have been able to draw out the general laws, which is what we call the laws of science. So we have noticed objects falling faster, objects falling slower, but the tides, the path of the planets, we were not drawn out that there's a general principle until a great scientist came along, and Newton, who managed to draw out the principles of gravity. So this is Bina. This is why it's referred to as establishing a konein. It establishes the house firmly, because now this is a house which has the principles. We've understood the concept or the idea behind it, what the purpose of it is, how to use it. We've drawn out the principles, what this is and what its purpose is. However, we're not yet living there. We're not yet experiencing it. And therefore, the third line of the metaphor is connecting with it, living with it, furnishing it, being there, part of it. And this is da'as. This is the quality of da'as, of experiencing something and internalizing it because it's become part of us. However much we've read about a life in a foreign country that we've never visited, until we've been there, we've never smelt the smells, we've never tasted the tastes, we've never felt the feel of the air, the feel of the atmosphere, the surroundings, the weather, the climate, the culture. Till that point, we haven't really understood it, we haven't integrated it, it hasn't become part of us. It's only by living there that we actually experience it. And this is the quality of da'as. It is da'as where something becomes part of us, becomes internalized. This is the first metaphor that's used in Mishli. The second metaphor, well, this is earlier in the order of Mishli, but the second one that Wolbe builds, brings, this is in Mishli chapter 3, uses different moshel, a different way of understanding these 3 qualities, but with an exact parallel. Hashem b'chokhmah yosad oret. The earth was set up with chokhmah. This is the space within which we live. Earth is our home, it's our house. It parallels the bias, the house in the previous moshel that we used to explain these ideas. A house, by the way, the earth is a house that we receive from above. It's not something that we have created ourselves. It's the environment within which we find ourselves. It's the little child who's been told constantly by their parents everything that's around them. It's the humanity when we are in our childhood and we just see everything around us and we don't understand the principles behind it. We notice that the suns work, that the stars go around, the planets go around, objects fall to the ground, the tides happen, but that's just the environment within which we're living. We haven't yet understood what's behind it. The second stage is konein shamayim b'sfuna. Now we are able to draw out the principles, the ideas, and through that we can establish shamayim. We can establish the heavens, the principles, the ideas, the concepts, the rules, what we're aiming for, what we're aspiring to achieve. This can be in Torah, and it can be in spiritual development, and it can be in science. A scientist is also trying to draw out the abstract concepts, the reasons, the principles behind. A scientist is also living in the world of the heavens, not the world of spiritual heaven, but the world of ideas and concepts. And therefore the scientist is drawing out the concepts removed from the physical material existence. The idea of a rule of science, the law of gravity. Where does the law of gravity exist? It's not a material object, it's a concept which explains all the material objects that are around. All material objects could disappear. There could be an explosion that removes all physical objects from the earth, from the universe, but the concept of the law of gravity would remain. So that is in Shamayim. That's in the abstract. That's the principles and the purpose that we can draw out. But it doesn't yet become part of us. It doesn't yet integrate into us. It hasn't yet sunk deep. And therefore, this is the third quality. B'datu tahomis nivko. Hashem dug deep into the depths through das, through this quality of something becoming part of us. So this is the idea that Wolbe is explaining over here, using and referencing these two verses, these two sets of psukim in Mishli, to help us understand the difference between these three faculties of reason and explain it to us. So let's read Wolbe now inside. We're on page Lamed Beis again, and in the second last page in the source sheet. And Wolbe says as follows: in Mishnah we find two definitions of das, and now he quotes these psukim: with chokhmah the house is built, with bina tevuna its foundations are established firmly, and bedas chatorim yimadu, but it's only in das that the rooms are filled. Kolhoni yaakov anoyim. At this place, it becomes a wealth of precious and pleasant riches. Second pasuk in Mishli Gimel: Hashem b'chokhmah yasad. This time we're talking about Hashem. He established the earth with chokhmah, but konin shemaim b'sfana, the principles of bina, the heavenly principles of bina. But datu tomis nivko, that which digs deep and into the innermost recesses, that is das v'shchokim yurafital, and the heavens drop down dew, which maybe we'll come on to later. Says Wolbe, das memalach hadorim. It is das which fills the rooms, it furnishes the rooms. Ubekast homus, and it splits, it digs deep into depths. Let's try and understand. Even though these ideas are so subtle that one can't really explain them with abstract reasoning, we're talking here about our inner life, what goes on inside our minds, how we think, how we process. This isn't something that's easily defined externally with dry words. The most we can do is say words which will act as a hint, where we can find these inside ourselves. And if you remember a couple of weeks back, I set this as a sort of homework, asking everyone to think internally how they can identify these things. Sometimes when someone points out to you the abstract reasoning, we can then find internally how this operates within us. The potential, the ability that we have to build a house, this is reason which is called chokhmah. It's the ability to build a house, which is that which constructs the form of a human being through these qualities of intelligence that we spoke about previously. Hakara, objective recognition of that which is outside, and haracha, evaluation. All of that is a bias, is referred to as a bias. And then in brackets he has, by it, a house, it's a defined form and a place. And he references something we discussed earlier, which we're not going to go through again, the difference between chomer, which is material, and surah, which is the structure. Habina, next line in Wolbe, hamavina dava mitoch dava, which understands one thing from another. It's that which takes out the seichel, the reason, from potential, because I'm just receiving raw data and raw information, and apoel to the absolute. I've actualized my seichel, because I understood the principles behind it. When I'm this little child, whether in age or humanity, just seeing the wonders of the world, I may gaze in wonder at everything amazing and brilliant out there, but I haven't yet understood the principle behind it. Someone can look at a sunset, you can stand on a cliff top, and you can look at the beauty of the sunset and be moved by its artistry and its poetry, but there's still something missing. If one understands what one's seeing, and one knows this is a ball in which a fission reaction is taking place, and fusion reaction is taking place, and the hydrogen has been converted to helium, and I understand this is a star, and that's it several light minutes away. This is wonderful. This is a completely different contemplation, completely different understanding of it. And we live in a time when we can understand this. Only a few hundred years ago, people had no idea what the stars were and what the sun was. So this is a deeper understanding and a deeper way of relating to it and connecting to it. This is the quality of Bina, which allows us to understand even the heavens in the second metaphor. Mavin Dova Mitoch Dova, and of course, relative to what perhaps they'll know in the future, we're still like these children standing with wonder at the shore of the sea, gazing at it with rapture, but not understanding the principles until we apply Seichel ala Poel, till we actualize it. We have all this potential, the innocence of the child looking and enjoying the world, but we haven't yet actualized it. We haven't yet understood the ideas behind it. This is Bina. V'hinei, says Wolbe, and the most important line perhaps in this whole piece, Seichel or Bina hem koiches. Seichel and Bina, Chochma and Bina, are abilities. They're all about things which are outside ourselves, rather than being internal. Ani mevin, I understand, maki or marich, evaluate and recognize, mash mechutzali, that which is outside myself, that which isn't inside me. Avol, ha'im einli mu'uma bekirbi, is there nothing inside me from within themselves? So here I'm going to pause, even though it's mid paragraph in the Wolbe, because there's something else we need to understand. What Wolbe is now going to teach us is that da'as refers to our inner understanding, and there's two ways we can understand this concept. The second way, which Wolbe will come to at the end of the page, is what we've spoken about till now, where I take information that I've outside myself, chokhmah, I learn the principles bina, and then I internalize it so that it becomes part of me, which is da'as. But in his first explanation of da'as, Wolbe is going to give it a slightly different twist, and he's going to speak about that which we know within ourselves. Now, if you ask people, how do they know things? Most people will say, I know things either from what I experience, or how I work out things that I've experienced, or perhaps things that people have told me. These are all sources from outside myself. What can I know from within ourselves? And the answer is, not very much, and everything at the same time. Not very much, because I don't know anything about the outside world. If I'm locked in a room without being able to see or experience anything, completely shut off from everything outside myself, I can be the cleverest man in the world. There's no one is as wise as someone who has experiences. I can be the cleverest man in the world, but I can't know anything about how the world actually operates. If I've never experienced gravity, I can never be a Newton, however great he is, and draw out the rules of gravity. I can't speculate about the sun and the moon or the earth or nature unless I've experienced it. So what can I know if I have no experiences, if I'm completely shut off? Nothing, not much, on the one hand. On the other hand, I can know everything, because the foundation of everything I know, what we call axioms or premises, are all from within myself and are not externally provable. The reason itself has to come from within ourselves. We can we can use logic to work out things, to work out more things, but we can't use logic to justify logic itself, because logic is what we would be using to justify logic. The rules of logic, the principles of logic, are axiomatic. Similarly, and I'll come back to this in a few moments and explain it, similarly when it comes to morality, the concept, the raw concept and idea that there's a good and a bad, the things that should happen and shouldn't happen, is an axiom. It's a premise. It's somehow from within ourselves. How we then apply it, we can think of all the complicated situations. Let me try and explain a little bit better what I mean. We often think in science or in maths that things are provable, and that's correct, they are provable. I can take a very basic, simple mathematical idea, and I can do the mathematical calculations, and I can prove it. But the tools that we are using to work out maths are not provable. Maths is built on a system of a few basic axioms or premises. First of all, it's built on the idea that logic makes sense, that logic is logical, that we can apply and use logic. What's an example of logic? Very basic idea. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Can I prove that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C? I can't prove it. What tools would I use to prove it? I mean, I can check up and do lots of experiments, but that doesn't prove it. Maybe in another case that isn't the case. The claim is that always, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Now, all maths is based on that assumption. All maths is based on the idea that 1 plus 1 makes 2, and 4 divided by 2 makes 2, and these two are identical. And yet the premise itself we can't prove, as the Greeks already pointed out. Interestingly, this idea that if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, I can say without knowing anything about the outside world. I may never have met an A or a B or C, and yet I can say the same thing. Let me give you an example of that. If I say if A is bigger than B and B is bigger than C, then I know that A is bigger than C. It's always built with an if. If this is the case and this is the case. I can make a statement. I can say if all people on the islands of Crete are black and Jack lives on the islands of Crete, then Jack must be black. This is a statement of logic. I know nothing about the truth. I don't know there is an island called Crete. I don't know if Jack lives on it. I don't know if all the people on it are black. But I can say a statement of logic, if A, then B, without knowing any facts at all. This is something that comes from within myself, and it's completely unprovable. I can't prove it because I can only operate within the system. Once I know the assumptions of logic, then I can operate within the system. I can't step out to prove the assumptions of logic. By the way, this is very closely connected to the first of these week's Sedras, Parshas Chukas, because there's a concept of a chayk, something I can't understand. Now, why should the Torah contain chukim? Surely we're meant to connect to the Torah, so there's mishpatim and there's mitzvahs. What's the point of a chayk? And the answer is chukim always deal with this idea here. It always deals with the system itself. I can explain everything within the box of our existence, but I can't step out of the existence and explain the facts of our existence itself. This is what a chayk is about. I'm not going to go on longer about a chayk other than to say that the recording of a shir I gave yesterday evening on the subject of chukim, linked to what Wolbe happens to be talking about here, is available, and I can send the recording. It's on our YouTube channel of the shul also, and I can send you an audio version of the shir also if you wish, in which I'm talking about the concept of chayk, which is very linked to this idea. The very most basic principles through which we operate in the world, we know, and we know absolutely with conviction these principles, and yet we don't know where they come from. We can't prove them from anything else. They're just built into ourselves, and we can know them even if we have no experiences. Even if we know nothing about Crete and Jack and different ethnicities that live in different locations, we can still say the same logic that exists. If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And it's exactly the same with morality. I can't prove morality through any other proof. People often question morality. And there's all sorts of theories out there to say, well, morality is just what I feel, or it's just what society has agreed. None of this is correct. If we saw a person torturing a small child for fun, chas v'shalom, we wouldn't argue, well, it's just a social contract. It's what people have agreed between themselves that this is right or wrong. We wouldn't argue this is just my feeling. We would say this is absolutely wrong in an intrinsic sense. And we can't prove morality. We just know that it's moral to be moral. It's correct to be moral. It's right to be moral. And it's immoral and terrible to be immoral, to torture these small children for fun. We can argue of all sorts of scenarios. We can argue what defines life. What about a little baby before they're born in a fetus? What about someone who's very elderly and already parts of their body systems have shut down? We can argue about the outside cases that are discussed in society, euthanasia and abortion and other such things. But the core issue, the core morality, that taking a life and just destroying it for pleasure, that we all agree upon. This has nothing to do with the Torah. This is pre the Torah. Derech Eretz Kodman Torah. This is about the most basic principles. You'll sometimes hear, and this is incorrect, it has no source, no correct source in our thinking, that the only way we can know morals is from the Torah. That's not correct. We can and should know morals from within ourselves. How to apply the morals, what situations, what to do on the edges, that's what we need Torah for. But the core idea of morality is something we should know even without Torah. Hashem turned to the Dor HaMabul. He hadn't received the Torah. He said to them, how can you behave in this way? He turned to the Torah flock, he turns to Paro and says, how can you enslave the Jews? Paro hasn't received the Torah yet, because there's core basic morality which we should know from within ourselves, even without the Torah. Derech Eretz Kodman Torah. In fact, one of the reasons we keep the Torah, why is it that we have to keep the Torah? Who says we have to listen to what Hashem says? One of the reasons is because we appreciate we're a guest in his home. He created the world, he gave us life, and therefore we owe him duty and obligation, responsibility and appreciation to obey the Torah he gives. So this is something that precedes the Torah. Only someone who has this axiom, this premise, this fundamental self-awareness that there's something called morality can then receive the Torah as a second stage, using their loyalty and appreciation and obedience to now start receiving and accepting the Torah. So this, therefore, is the next point that Wolbe makes, that Das, he refers to this sort of inner knowledge, these axioms that come from within ourselves, and he says this exists in the moral sphere, and this exists in the sphere of maths and logic and science. By the way, science is the same thing. You may hear from people who don't understand these ideas, don't understand philosophy or science, that science can somehow prove things. It's not true. All science can do is investigate phenomena and then draw out the simplest rule. It's called the principle Occam's razor, or the principle, those of you who are studying science, the simplest rule to explain it. And that seems to tell us how this operates. But why this works, again, it's just axiomatic. It seems reasonable to us that this is how to understand the world within which we live. So let's read Wolbe inside, in which he speaks about this first sort of das, not the das of things which are external, that we internalize, but things which are axiomatic to us. And there's a reason why he explains this first. Hakar Chabona Bayis, we're in the middle of the paragraph that begins with Hakar Chabona Bayis. in which he spoke about these forces being external. We'll just very quickly read through them. Hakar chabona bias, shehu hayotza suras adam al yedei hakar v'aracha, v'aseichel hanikra kan chachma. This is chachma. Then he carries on, habina mevina davar mitochtov, understanding something from within itself. And he carries on in the next line. This all refers to things which are mechutz la'adam. I understand and recognize and evaluate something outside myself. Aval. So we're now thirds of the way down through this paragraph. Aval ha'in leini kol ma'uma b'kirbi. Do I not have anything else that's b'kirbi, that's within me, that's part of me? What can I know from within myself? Ha'imes ha'kol ani tzorech lahachnis al toichim mechutzali. Do I have to get everything out inside myself from outside myself? In Canaan, then I'm an impoverished person. I have nothing for myself. If we are completely empty from within ourselves, if we don't have something of internal knowledge, then what can we use to receive anything outside ourselves? We have to have the premises, the axioms, the assumptions, in order then to begin collecting everything else. Otherwise, what is it within ourselves that can receive the outside information to begin trying to make sense of it? So we have to have from within ourselves something. Then he carries on, Yesh bi maskoros shani yodei ma'atzmi. I have what's called in Hebrew maskoros rishonos. In English we call these axioms, assumptions, which I know from myself. Without needing to recognize them outside, like some of the basic rules of logic. I don't need to see these from outside. I don't need to deduce them and work them out using the quality of bina. Muskolos rishonim, these are the first assumptions, the basic premises or axioms that we have in life. This is deya in a person. This is the quality of deya. Through this knowledge, a person knows this naig b'derech eretz, the basic derech eretz, basic morality. Even through things which no one else taught him. Give an example, that is the right of privacy. And someone who doesn't know these, Chazal say with great strength, a person, even if they are Talmud Chacham, but doesn't have these axioms, these premises of das, they are an empty purpose, like a person, like a carcass. There's certainly numerous basic principles like these, that a person knows from themselves, and they are obvious and clear to a person without any doubt. Even though they have no proof or evidence for these. And he says, in science, in science, these are called axioms, or mathematica, even maths, which is the most precise of all the sciences, is still built on axioms. So this is one idea of das. It's the most basic assumptions we have about life, the inner tools that we use to fit everything else in. Now, in this model, what comes first? Not chokhmah, not bina, but das. So the order of midas in this line, this way of using, are bottom up. You start from das, then you go on to bina and chokhmah. Das is the framework, the foundation, the premise upon which everything else can be built. Because without this inner knowledge, nothing else can be absorbed and understood. But now we're going to look at a top-down approach, in which chokhmah and bina come first, and after that das follows. That's things which we receive from the outside that we integrate inward. So in one model, one way of looking at it, das comes first. It's the receptor that receives everything else, and from that we can then use it to begin absorbing that which is outside ourselves. But now that we have that quality, we can begin absorbing things which are outside ourselves and integrating them back into our das. And therefore we have to adopt this model of starting with das, starting with what we know, with our own innermost knowledge, then exploring outwards, and then bringing that knowledge back home within ourselves. We must never forget das. We must never forget our inner knowledge. We must never forget that which is the starting point. Sometimes you will hear clever philosophers or scientists who say they don't believe in free will, or they don't believe in morality. They're very clever people, but they've forgotten where we've started. These are things which are innermost knowledge. Free will is something I experience from within myself. If there's evidence that it's in some shape or form an optical illusion, then this is evidence that's defying the very utensil, the very ability I have to know anything about the world. The most basic thing I can know about the world is myself, that I am a being that is conscious, that is aware, that is absorbing everything outside me. Once I have that, then I can begin integrating things into it. I can't use my external experiences to doubt the facts of my very own existence. Similarly, morality is one of these things which can't be disproven by external evidence because it's an inner knowledge. I know that I am horrified and shocked, not just personally with feelings, but I don't know what it would mean to have someone who tells me, no, it's perfectly okay to torture a small child for fun. I have no problem with that. We wouldn't know how to relate to such a person. When a person questions axioms, if someone can look you in the eye and say, I think A can equal B, and B can equal C, but A doesn't equal C. I think that A can be bigger than B and B can be bigger than C, but I don't think that A is bigger than C. And someone tells you that they mean that seriously, they don't believe this, you don't know how to have a conversation with them. You don't know how to deal with it. Either they're lying or there's no one there to speak to. Because how could the premise of speech, the assumption of speech, the ability to even argue with it, when they say prove it to me, means they're accepting a vocabulary of proof, a concept of proof. If that even that they don't have, then who am I there to speak to? How can I set out to prove this to them at all? So this is a premise and axiom which I can't deny. Someone tells me and says, I think there's nothing wrong with torturing a small child for fun. I need to draw the conclusion either they're lying to me or there's simply no one there that I can connect to. There's no moral code, there's no basis of shared vocabulary with which I can talk to the person at all. So this is these qualities. Now Wolbe speaks about the second set, the bringing external ideas inwards into our das. That means we need to take our external insights and bring them back home, bring them back into our self-awareness, into how do we perceive and see the world. You know, it's a bit like, there's sometimes things that I experience where I need to consciously reason to work out what it is. But other times I just know what it is because it's something that's become internalized into the very lenses through which I see the world. I can see someone and I don't go through like perhaps a piece of facial recognition software would do and measure the distance between the pupils of their eyes and the length of their nose and the height of their forehead and the shape of their cheeks and their ears and do a calculation to work out who it is. I just recognize them. I've integrated my knowledge of what they are. So it's no longer just an external piece of reasoning, bina, or information, knowledge, but it's internal. I've learned it's become part of how I see the world. And this is bringing things back to das. And we're now on the last two lines on the page. Hageta hasheni shel hadasu shebekast homos. It plumbs to the depths. Zera koach hanifla hama kashes aseichel imamidus. This is the quality of taking that which came first and is outside and bringing it into our innermost beings. This is what we explained earlier. Behevdel, we're now turning over the page. Behevdel ben haklal Yisrael v'umas ha'olam. The difference between Klal Yisrael, who have accepted the Torah, and the umas ha'olam, who have chosen at the moment in this time not to accept the Torah. So here I'll summarize outside what Wolbe says, and with that we will stop and Emiyat Hashem next week conclude this chapter. Wolbe says that there needs to be an acceptance of the realm of mitzvahs in order to be able to internalize these qualities that are external to ourselves. And this is really the essence of where Torah comes in. So if we ask what's the place of Torah, Torah is not the axioms, the derech eretz kodma Torah. Torah is the second sort of das, which is the equipment we can use to funnel that which is external to ourselves inwards into our internal life. And therefore this is the essence of what makes us as Klal Yisrael, the recipients of the Torah, have the privilege of being having Torah. It's about integrating that which is external into das, the second sort of das. So to summarize, Wolbe has reminded us of these qualities of Chochmah, Bina, and Das. He's spoken at length about this internal Das. Now our challenge is, how can we grow that internal Das by feeding more back into it? And that will be the subject of next week's shir, the last shir on this chapter of Wolbe. And again, for this week's homework, let's use these ideas that Wolbe shared with us and think about Das. Think about what are our muskolos rishonos, what are the very premises and axioms that we use to navigate the world. And sometimes, by the way, we have wrong pieces of das, and these are very painful to discover. These are the unhealthy habits, the unhealthy perspectives we've drawn up. Perhaps there's ways that we view the world. Maybe we think everyone's out to get us. We're a little bit paranoid. Or maybe we see fundamentally our role is to try and avoid doing things that we need to do. We need to check what are our axioms, our premises that we use to dissect things. And therefore, for this week, every time one makes a decision, every time one reasons something out, every time one adopts a position, ask oneself, what are the principles that I'm using to arrive at this decision? What are the framework that I'm using to make this assessment? And once you have the framework, ask yourself then, and why have I adopted this as the framework? Is it just because this seems to be the only way that I can operate? I can't consider any other possibility? Or is there a deeper reason? And if we keep on questioning ourselves and probing, and what makes me think that? And what makes me think that? And why do I think that? We can arrive at what are the axioms, the assumptions with which we're operating. And these are the assumptions of das. And then we need to ask ourselves, are these correct assumptions or not? But that's a very difficult and sometimes painful process of almost self-operating on oneself to understand these. But certainly it's worthwhile noticing what are the assumptions that you're assuming in life, whether it's in intelligence and reason, whether it's in morality. Every view you adopt, every stance you take, every political opinion you express, every relationship opinion you express. You have relationships, interactions with friends, with parents, with children, with siblings. Some people upset you, some people you like. Ask yourself, why am I assuming this? Why do I think this is the way it is? What are the reasons, the reason that I'm undergoing to arrive at this conclusion? And then what are the working principles that I'm using to help me operate in this? And this is absolutely vital in the work of Musa and character development that Wolbe is describing. And please God, we will then use that as a launch pad next week to finish this chapter and talk about how we can then grow our Das and improve it. So I'll stop there. I'll close the meeting in a minute unless anyone wants to ask any questions. I'll just give you a chance if you want to unmute yourselves. Otherwise, I'll close the meeting for today. Okay, I wish everyone a good evening. Thank you so much again for joining, and should all be well.